Okay, breaking news. We've got a date for G Day. So people like me really nerd out on this sort of stuff. Of course, we're on the field the whole time. The Dogs will be playing their annual G Day game, which is the spring game that the football program hosts, on April 13th, 2024. That's something that I should be putting on the screen right now. Here we go. That's something that's been bantied about for a while. That is the same Saturday, as the Masters. So if you are confronted between going to the Masters or going to Athens, we'll see you in Augusta. Um, Look, why is this weekend? Well, usually it's because that's when television wants it, and this has become more and more the case lately. Is that brands like Georgia, Texas, Alabama, um, the rights holders for these sorts of things, they're going to want to take advantage of it. And my suspicion is, obviously ESPN has nothing to do that weekend because it would be going up against the Masters. So they're going to do, the 6th, April 6th, they're probably doing a set of games then, the 13th and the 20th. Now, last year, you may or may not remember, there's a couple things going on here at once. Last year, you may remember, I believe Georgia was on the 30th, or was on the 20th, or that in that ballpark of G Day. But for G Day, the other kind of wouldn't say it's complicated. It's complicated if you're ESPN. The Masters is a little bit later this year than it traditionally is. Usually, the Masters is the kind of the first weekend of April. That's not the case this year. I'm not sure I know the reason why why, but that's usually not the case. So this past year, it was on April 16th. I said the 20th. It was on April 16th or 15th, one of the two. April 15th. So, if you're Kirby and them, uh, I don't know. I don't know how many people really care about the Masters versus G Day. I mean, it is a little strange though that the Masters is slightly later this time. Um, but they announce future dates like way ahead of time. Like I can tell you right now that the Masters in the future, we know what it's the dates for that through 2028. So it's been announced for some time now that it's later. Just looking at the schedule for the Masters, it's getting later. It's getting later each time. Like I don't know if all of these are on the first Saturdays and Sundays, but clearly the 14th is not the first Sunday. The 13th is not the first Sunday, and I don't think the 12th and the 11th can be the first Sunday either. So maybe I don't know why the Masters is backing it up, and someone from Augusta can text me or call me or email me and correct me, but that's usually when it is from my memory. A lot of times it does deal with Easter. Like we got an earlier Easter this year, I think. Going off the top of my head, I think it's in March. So that's an earlier Easter too. So all of these in Georgia, the Easter's March 31st. So in Georgia, I think it's probably the only place that legitimately does get concerned about when is the Masters versus our spring game. But in this case, we know when it is now. So I expect this game to be either on ESPN or ESPN2, but I don't think it legally yet could be on ABC. I could be wrong about that, and even if it could, by I just don't. I think we're still under the contract for this academic year. I may call somebody about that just to see if that's possible. But I think even if it were possible, it's probably not something that the folks at Disney would want to do is eat up a Saturday with SEC football. But there's worse things in the spring. I'll tell you that right now. These games typically are not big draws in terms of eyeballs, but you know, whenever you get a chance to put Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. I mean, Fox has been very progressive in terms of pushing their sports package with basketball on Big Fox. Yeah, I mean, I don't blame them. They're paying a lot of money for that contract. I put Caitlin Clark on television a lot too. I'm just not sure I'd put the Illinois women playing the Indiana women on Big Fox, but it's their call. I think it's a completely different ball game when you start talking about, well, why don't we do ABC like this heading into the spring? Why don't we go, Georgia at 1, Georgia at 1, Alabama at 3, Texas at 6, or something and you could have or just back to backs. They're not going to give away primetime ABC. I can assure you of that, but they might go afternoon, and it just broadens the sport and makes it bigger. The thing about college football, we've never had more people watching college football. It's more widely available. I think that's important to point out too. But it's kind of it's growing. College football is not dying. I mean, look at baseball; it's in trouble. NASCAR had grown dramatically, and then now, in the last 15 years, it's fallen. But I think it's sustained itself where it's at, and I think for college football, it's not going to pass the NBA, but it could be the nation's number 3 sport, and in terms of viewership and the total viewership, in terms of popularity, in terms of contracts, stuff like that. But it's if I'm Disney and I'm Bob Iger and I've paid that much money, I would want to make sure I'm showcasing it. Now for Georgia, and I'm sure they will. For Georgia, it's a spring game where you're going to get a good look at a lot of different guys, and that Ryan Puglisi's going to be in town. Obviously, Gunnar Stockton. Those are the two that you'll pay the most attention to. Gunnar Stockton played a lot against Florida State. I don't think Florida State's forgotten about that. You've got. I mean, some guys will not be there. Dwight Phillips Jr. will not be there. So it would be very curious to see him. But you got a lot of guys coming back. Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse, Xavier Truss, Tate Ratledge, Chad Lindbergh, Fairchild Morris, Wilson, Green, Bobo, Freeling, Hughley. I mean, they got so many guys on that offensive line that are returning. I talked about this the other day. I think the kind of most curious spot, and G-Day will shed light on it. But keep in mind, G-Day is exactly 8% of the practices that Georgia will have. That's it. And it's not, it's not like this is like the end-all, be-all of practices. I'm sorry, 7%. So it's the most important practice, I would say, because everybody's there watching, the band is playing, all of these things. But, I wouldn't overdo it with G-Day one way or the other, right? I mean, but I think G-Day is one of the most, the word underrated comes to mind. It really doesn't matter after the first quarter, but I think it's a great opportunity to get to Athens, to go, you see me wearing this Red Zone shirt, to go to visit Scott and Mindy at Red Zone. What will they have that you can't get anywhere else? What will they have that you've been missing out if you live in Augusta or Hepzibah, or to Augusta area, Hiwassee, or Harlem, or another. Man, Augusta's got to mix up some of these names. Evans, Martinez. Yeah, I mean, if you're not coming to Athens in a long time, well, it's just G-Day is great for that because it's not a lot of traffic. It probably won't be totally full. There's still going to be, I'll talk about this a lot, there's still going to be some construction at G-Day for sure. Now, how much, I don't know, and I'm saying that off the cuff here, but I do know that there's, whether or not they'll be done with some of the stuff that they're getting ready for in 2024, I don't know. You may not see the construction. We will. Press has been moved to an upper right hand, well, I'll call it upper left hand corner of the stadium. But I don't know if that middle area for these bigger donors, I don't know if that's going to be ready yet or not. It's a good question, actually. So but with all that said, you may or may not recall the national championship celebration from 23. There's becoming so many of these championship celebrations, it's hard to remember. That whole side of the stadium could not be used because, if I'm not mistaken, there was a water. The water was shut off on that side of the stadium so they could do work and get that side of the stadium ready. But it's not ideal. It's ideal for the team to go practice there because no one's in the stadium itself. But if you like fans, but if you are, you've got essentially you've got from like pots of time to do work on the stadium. You've got graduation in May, and then you've got that period of time, say about 3 months, and then you've got the games, and then from the games, the whole fall is shot. So September to November, you're out. But then could be Thanksgiving, could be middle November, like it sort of was this past time. Until about G-Day, you can do a lot of work on the stadium. Well, they're not just going to pause stuff for one day so they can, so that, like, they're not going to say, oh, well, let's put the water main back together. No. So that's what's going on. We've got G-Day coming up. I love G-Day. I used to hate it. I think it's more useful now, more meaningful. It's less, sort of ridiculous. I think Kirby changed the way that G-Day is viewed by me. But I know they won't. But just speaking as a photographer, I wish the coaches would get from behind the offense and just let us have that day of clean shooting. But that's not going to happen. That's me, just being me. Y'all run your run your multi-million-dollar program however you feel. I don't need Kirby in the background of some of these shots. That's all I'm saying. We'll see you on the next video.